let's talk about that International Anti-Corruption Day now. And today the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation picketed outside a conference at Unisa in Pretoria. The gathering was hosted by the university, the Public Service Commission and the UN under the title United Against Corruption, building a culture of accountability for sustainable development. The Public Service and Administration Minister Senzo Mqunu, as you heard, they received a memorandum of demands from the picketers. Let's chat some more about this. Joining us via Skype is Zakira. She's from the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation. Zakira, good evening. How successful was your picket, do you think?
Good evening. I think despite the weather today, it was quite successful. We had a group of people picketing outside the conference itself. And the basic call was that government needs to have a strategic plan put into place to deal with state capture. At the moment, we're seeing bits and pieces being done to tackle the problem, but we're not getting a sense of a comprehensive plan that's being outlined. And I think that's one of the issues that were raised in the conference itself. Other than that, I think we expected a few more people, especially young people who expressed interest in attending. But due to the weather and the constraints it imposed, I think it made it a bit difficult for people to come through. But nonetheless, we went ahead and we were well received by government, by representatives of government. So I think it was quite successful.
Do you think, though, that you will actually really be heard, Zakir? I mean, what do you say to South Africans who seem to be losing faith in the system, that, you know, they don't believe that anyone will ever answer to any corruption allegation or charge, even with the state capture inquiry going on at the moment?
I think our picket was twofold. So on the one hand, it sought to thank the Hawks and the NPA for work done thus far. And I think at least in the last couple of weeks, we have seen some action in the form of a few arrests taking place, some form of action being taken against certain companies that were implicated in state capture and corruption. So there has been some work done. But at the same time, we were there to call on them to keep up the pressure, to intensify their efforts, and basically to ensure that those implicated in state capture and corruption are speedily brought to book. I think there is a growing impatience in the public to see that this is done. And we're hoping that specifically, I think the key faces of corruption, or people who have symbolically come to represent corruption in state capture in this country, in the form of the Gupta families through their alleged role in state capture and corruption, that they at least be brought to book in this country. And that was one of the key calls, that the government needs to begin the process of prosecuting them, and thereafter interacting with the UAE and India and other countries to finalize the agreements to bring them over to be held accountable in South Africa.
I mean, are you actually hopeful, though, that we have what it takes, that our authorities have what it takes, Zakira, to actually get to those individuals who we believe, you know, have reaped the benefits of corruption in this country, those who've managed to fill their pockets? I mean, you mentioned the NPA, and some have been very critical of the NPA, saying very little has happened. Yes, there were those one or two politicians we saw facing some charges just a couple of weeks ago, but and the Hawks as well. I mean, the criticism out there is that they've really not done enough. We expected more to have happened by now. You know, are you really, really hopeful that this can be done?
The message today from the NPA and the Hawks was that we do need a bit more patience, and they once again urge the public to give them a bit more time to complete their work and to finalize their cases. However, I do think that it's going to take a lot more public pressure over the next couple of months and perhaps even years to deal with the problem of state capture. What we've come to realize over the last couple of months working in this field is that it's not going to take just a week or two or quick fix solutions to try and solve many years of damage, systemic damage that was done to the state through state capture and corruption. So it's going to take a long time, and it's going to require the collective of society to join hands in this effort. And I think today that was one of the calls that we were making, that business, civil society, labor, faith-based institutions, as well as the state, need to get together to develop this comprehensive plan. So there is some strategic thinking towards what needs to be done in the next few years. What we previously discussed among civil society organizations at a recently held conference is that state capture is a phenomenon of the past, the present, and the future. So there are incidents that have happened in the past where there needs to be accountability, where we need to get some of the funds that were taken out of the country or out of the system back into the system itself. But it's also a problem of the present, where there are loopholes in the system that people would still perhaps want to manipulate. And in the future, those loopholes need to be plugged to ensure that we don't have future incidents of capture that occur.
I mean, just on the other side, I mean, do you think South Africans have what it takes? I mean, we're happy to sit back and moan and complain about what's happening and who's taken what from us. But I mean, just looking at countries like Brazil, Argentina, I mean, even Iraq, for example, you know, we know they've had their fair share of problems. And, you know, are South Africans, do they really get into it and do they really hold this government accountable, or hold those involved in state capture accountable? Do you believe that we do everything that we can? Do we put our money where our mouths are?
Well, there's a bit of both. We have been a bit complacent as a society. We haven't monitored government as effectively as we should have been monitoring them, especially from a civil society perspective. I think that's at the national, provincial and local government level. But at the same time, I think society has stepped up to the plate in certain instances. So 2016, 2017, we've seen an upsurge of civic activism around the issue. We've seen society standing up and rallying behind common causes and issues. And I think now's the time to do so again. We need to be thinking, however, beyond just mass-based struggles, but we need to be giving careful thinking to policy work that needs to be done, academic work that needs to be done in the field of developing the state, plugging in those loopholes that I mentioned earlier within the public service and administration sector. We need to be looking at how to empower communities to monitor things like budgets that take place for big infrastructure projects or community-based projects, and that's ongoing work that will have to take place. But I think more than ever, we just need to be creating awareness in society. What we found in our work over the last couple of months is that many people know there's something called state capture, but don't necessarily understand the depth of it and the way it has impacted them in ordinary ways. For example, the Eskom lights issue. Yeah. And there's ongoing education and awareness that needs to be created, both about the problems as well as how communities and individuals and organizations can tackle those problems.
Thanks very much. Ahmed Kathrada from the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation. Yes.